Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. It's Tori, and today I am here to talk about a series that I have already finished here in the year 2026, which feels amazing. And I'm going to talk to you guys about it. It deserves its own individual video review because it was just that good, and it is a series that is highly underrated in my opinion and not talked about that much on BookTube. So you know me, I love bringing some underrated fantasy recommendations to my audience. So let's buckle in and talk about the Coldfire Trilogy by C.S. Friedman. Now I'm going to say first of all that this will be a primarily spoiler-free review, and what I mean by that is I'm not going to be spoiling any of the events in the books other than things that you'll find in the very beginning of book one. I may touch on some themes that are a through line through the entire book, some character things, but I will avoid giving any major series spoilers. So let's get into it. Now, the trilogy consists of Black Sun Rising, which is book one, book two, When True Night Falls, and book three, which is Crown of Shadows. And when I first picked these up, I started with Black Sun Rising, and this was a book that I had been really interested in, kind of along the lines of my reads going back into sort of some classic female written fantasy. And I had this on my shelves for a while, and it sounded really intriguing, and I picked it up, and I was completely blown away. Now, I'll be the first to admit that classic fantasy as a term does tend to give me a little bit of a pause sometimes, just because I've read other things that would be considered more classic fantasy that I really did not jive with. But as I've gotten further into the world of fantasy reading in general, a lot of modern fantasy doesn't really work for me either. So at this point, it's just an individual basis. But what's really cool about this series, and the first thing that I wanted to mention, is while this is technically a fantasy, it's also a sci-fi, and it also has some horror flavor in it. So for anybody that's interested in a genre mashup, this trilogy has so much to offer. And not in the sense that it just uses those genres as a set dressing. There are deeply embedded world building and character aspects that fit into each of those genres. So she is fully utilizing all three of them, which I think is really, really cool and something that I don't see all that often. Now, I feel like a lot of books that utilize a genre blend of some kind of pick a main emphasis genre and then just sort of sprinkle in the other ones. This series really doesn't do that. There is a very strong fantasy element, there's a very strong sci-fi element, and there's a very strong horror element. And I think it is so cool the way that C.S. Friedman was able to mix those three in such a perfect balance. Now, when I started this book, it did take me about 20% to really settle into what C.S. Friedman was doing here and the story she was telling. There's a couple of things that happen at the very beginning with kind of a subplot in this story that felt a little bit convenient, a little bit classic fantasy, and I was like, I really don't know what I'm in for here. But the world building and the way that she was setting up this very gothic, very poetic kind of planet and magic system, and the characters that were being placed into that setting was so intriguing that I could not put this book down. All the way through the book, I really had a hard time putting it down, which is interesting because I wouldn't consider the prose of this series to be lightweight prose or straightforward. It is very lyrical. She almost writes chapter openings like free verse poetry sometimes, which I really liked, and really draws your attention to a certain element of the picture she's painting as she introduces you to these new settings or a new character. So the prose is not light and fluffy by any means. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say that it's dense, because I didn't find it that way personally, but it is definitely something that is asking to be savored. It is asking you to slow down with it a little bit, which I do love. A basic synopsis of what you're going to find as you're coming into this first book is we are on a planet called Urna, where humankind has landed hundreds and hundreds of years ago to try to remake their society after the destruction of Earth. So that aspect of it brings in the science fiction. Now, the horror aspect of this series comes in when we're talking about the demonic forces and the alien forces and the vampiric forces that populate Urna and are fighting against the humans, and that the humans are desperately trying to control and fight against as well. And it is so there are some really, really creepy things in this series. The horror aspect of it is also very present, just as much as the science fiction and the fantasy. Now, where the fantasy comes in is we are on a planet called Urna, which is basically ruled by a hierarchy of fae magic. And in C.S. Friedman's work, fae has a very different connotation than what a lot of the modern fae fantasy stories are putting out there. One of the things I think is really interesting about this is that the modern idea of fae folk, which is largely perpetrated by the trend of romantasy books right now, is very different than the original folklore, fairy tales, old legends of what the fae folk originally were. And C.S. Friedman goes back to that archetype much more, where they are wild, feral, terrifying beings. They are absolutely bone-chilling in some aspects of this trilogy. And I love that. I love that she's not afraid to make them magnetic. They want to draw you in. There is a seductive quality to them, but the way that she handles it does not make it something that you put the book down and you go, wow, that's just really awesome and I love that. It's actually terrifying and you're like, man, I really hope I never run across one of these creatures in my entire life. Her descriptions of the world and settings that she's creating in this series are so incredible. The atmosphere that she's able to create for the reader is so immersive and interesting, and it's different. There's so many interesting and unique locations in all three books, and you find some of them right away in book one. She doesn't take her time to really build up to like the one unique location that she's created. It's literally just seeded through the entire book, which is really, really interesting to me. Let's talk about the characters in this series a little bit, because I can't say too much without spoilers, so I'm gonna keep it very vague. But there's a really interesting kind of, it's not exactly what I would call a motley crew, but there is an aspect of forced proximity to these characters that I find really layered and really fascinating to read about. This story is a very slow burn, has that kind of classic quest element to it, with these characters that are drawn together by necessity rather than familiarity and comfort, and they're driving towards a singular shared goal. You have a priest who is, he's basically a paladin, right? He is a priest, but he's a warrior priest, and he is incredibly devout in his faith. He is very convinced that he knows exactly the way to do things and the right and wrong of things. And he is thrown into a situation where he has a traveling companion that basically challenges every single aspect of who he is as a person, and vice versa, which I think this has one of the most interesting explorations of faith and the nuances of that. And I always really love when an author is willing to commit to something a lot more nuanced than just here's side one, here's side B, this is the one that you should root for, this is the one that you shouldn't. I really appreciate when an author is willing to dig deep with something like a faith system. And I love that she does that in this series, because it is just fascinating. There's such a, I think as a person of faith myself, such a relatable push and pull and struggle to this story that I really loved. There's also a character arc in this first book that speaks to walking a trauma healing journey and the vulnerability of that in multiple ways, and how you have to lean on people and how you kind of tightly grip your own agency through that. So many good things in the characters in here. C.S. Friedman also kind of deconstructs the vampire, the gothic vampire archetype in this, which I just think is fascinating and I love it. I read Dracula late last year, and I cannot tell you how strongly I felt the Dracula vibes in this story. So the best way I can pitch the character journey that we go on in this first book is you have essentially the equivalent of Dracula meets a paladin in forced proximity to each other because they're sharing a common goal, and also you have a character who has lost a very important aspect of their identity and is trying to rebuild themselves with the help of these two characters. It is so fascinating, you guys. This is a character exploration reader's absolute dream series, in my opinion. This is the type of story that is going to resonate very strongly with people who like to spend time going on a quest that is as much about the characters and their internal journey on that quest as it is the actual physical goal of where we're going and what we're trying to achieve, which I love, because that's the type of story that really resonates with me, especially right now at the stage of life that I'm in. And I found her character work to be so good. It was just so refreshing to read an author that was willing to dig that deeply with her characters. I absolutely loved it. Now, the other thing I'll say about this series is there is some dark content in here, and I think that C.S. Friedman handles it all really, really well for the most part. There were a couple of nitpicks that I had here and there, but overall, she handles it in a way that is very intentional and very thoughtful and has a lot to say about each topic she's confronting within the series. There is a section, you guys, in book 3, and again, no spoilers in terms of like events or specifics, but I will say that there is a payoff in book 3 when it comes to a character arc that we've been following since book 1 that is so haunting and bone-chilling that it still lives in my head rent-free. It's very dark. It is very much going to the deepest, darkest place of your past and confronting it and having to come face to face with things that you have done. And it's just so powerful to read. I had to put it down a couple of times, but not in the sense that I was like, I can't believe that this author is, handling this way. It was I can't believe that she is able to bring us to this emotional precipice. I love a payoff, and one of the things that I think C.S. Friedman does so well in this trilogy is offers us a lot of emotional payoffs and a lot of character arc payoffs, not just in the end of the trilogy, but also in the first book. There's so many things in this that were just so satisfying, and again, she's asking you to come alongside these characters to really fully be present in the story, be part of what's going on, and to settle in for the journey that covers all 3 books. Another positive I will give this series is that for everybody out there who says that they love an anti-hero character, and what they mean by that is they like a hero who sort of does a bad thing on the weekends sometimes, that's not what you're going to get in here. This is a full fight against a broken, very flawed hero versus a true anti-hero, someone who is very at their core evil and self-centered and greedy and just lost, quote unquote, beyond redemption, and that's one of the big themes of the series. And he is a full-bodied anti-hero. He is the kind of character that you desperately want to do the right thing, and you're never sure if it's actually going to happen, or if it does happen, was it kind of an accident or a fluke? This is one of the best standards of an anti-hero character that I've read in a long time. I so much appreciate an author that can take me on a roller coaster with a character where I am constantly questioning, how do I feel about this character? Do I actually think that they're doing the right thing? Do I actually believe them? And she brought me through that journey with multiple characters in this series. And it is a fairly intimate main cast throughout all 3 books. There's a lot of characters that we meet, but it is a smaller kind of axis that takes us through the story, which I actually really enjoyed because there's a lot of detail going on. There's a lot of world building. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot of magic and just the system of things to figure out. So I appreciated that she did balance that with a little bit of a smaller main cast. So if any of that sounds good to you, you should check out this series, the Coldfire Trilogy by C.S. Friedman. It is phenomenal. It is a series that will be staying on my shelf, and I am so happy that I picked this up, that this was my first finished series of 2026. This is going to be a really tough one to beat, you guys. One of these books absolutely will be on my top 10 books of 2026. I'll be shocked if I have enough books to chase my favorite of these out of the running for that. I'd say if I had to pick my favorite, I think it's probably book 2. I think it's probably book 2. I really love this. I gave book 1 5 stars. I gave book 2 5 stars. I gave book 3 4 stars. Just because I did feel like there was some repeating plot elements and some repeated ending things that had already sort of been utilized in the other 2 books, but I still really loved a lot of things about this 3rd book. So overall, that is a very successful series for me, and I was so excited to come on here and tell you guys about it and tell you to read it again, because I know I've been talking about it quite a lot in my other videos up to this point. This is so good, you guys. It's so good. It is very dark, so definitely if you want any content warnings or anything like that, feel free to ask down in the comments or message me on whatever social media platforms. But yeah, really enjoyed this series. It was really thought-provoking. It was one of those that I really enjoyed savoring and just fully immersing in the atmosphere of these stories. She uses the environment, you guys, in such an interesting way. She's so good. I will definitely be reading more C.S. Friedman in the future, and I look forward to rereading this series and getting even more out of it the second time around, because man, that first read through was an experience and I had an absolute blast with it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that if you decide to read this trilogy, that you will come back to this video and you will tell me down in the comments below what you thought of it. If you already have, please let me know now. I hope you are having a fabulous week. I hope that whatever you're reading, it's a 5-star read, and I will see you in the next video.